Hey everybody, and welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis Fields, and today we're going to be brewing up a Black IPA. When we talk about winter beers, we typically are thinking stouts and porters and amber ales and other things like that. But the Black IPA, although it's been around for a while, has really come into popularity over the last couple of years. So we're going to be brewing one. And first, what is a Black IPA? Because you know what they say, once you go Black IPA, you can't go back IPA. That's right. I'm pretty sure that's right. We're going to get into what that is and all of the other characteristics around making one after you hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and we'll get after it. Also, if you think these videos are helpful, consider buying me a beer. You can hit the link right up here or in the video description below. Cheers. So what is a Black IPA? Well, it is 21B of the BJCP Style Guidelines Specialty IPA Black IPA. And it's a beer that has the same dryness and hop-forward balance of a typical American IPA, but really only in darker colors. You should still get those high hop aromas, often fruity and tropical, piney, often found with an American IPA. And those are really common for a West Coast style IPA. And so a lot of people think with a Black IPA that you should be able to have two of them in your hands, and if you are blindfolded, you'd taste one, yep, that's an IPA. You'd taste the other one, yep, that's also an IPA. And when you'd open up your blindfold, you'd say, oh my God, I can't believe this one is dark. That's not quite it, right? Although it should have some of the similar characteristics, it can have a little bit of roasty characteristics. The style guidelines for flavor say there can be restrained chocolate or coffee flavors present, but the roast notes should not be intense. They shouldn't be ashy, they should be burnt, and they shouldn't clash with the tropical and fruity notes or piney notes that are typically found in the American IPA. So one way we do that is to limit the astringentness that can happen from some of those darker colored malts in the mash process. And so there is going to be two different types of darker malts, both chocolate and Carafa III, and those two malts specifically we're going to be doing a different process for and adding that color in later. So let's talk about the recipe and how we're going to go about doing that. As always, I'm going to have the full recipe and description and some of the instructions in the video description below. You can go check that out, along with some links to other videos that might show you some of the steps that we're talking about today. So this particular recipe is going to have 11.5 pounds of 2-row, 1 pound of Crystal 80, 10 ounces of Carafa III, and 4 ounces of American chocolate. Specifically for our mash process, we're going to be taking those Carafa III and American chocolate malts, and we're going to be steeping them separately in room temperature water to kind of pull out some of that color. So we're going to mill them separately. We're going to put them in about a half gallon or so of our sparge water that we're going to normally add to our batch sparge, but we're going to leave that at room temperature water. It is important though to get those water additions that you would be adding in there first. So make sure you do that, then pull off a half a gallon of water and steep your specialty grains that way. For the 2-row and the Crystal 80, we're going to be treating that like we would any other beer. We're going to be going ahead and crushing those, mashing that for 60 minutes like we normally would, but make sure that you're using your calculator to remove those other two malts as you are figuring out how high you need your temperature for your strike water. That way your strike water is not too high and you have a higher mash temperature than you anticipated. For the hops in this one, we're going to be using Magnum for 60 minutes at 1 ounce. We're going to be doing 2 Cascade additions, both 1 ounce, one at 15 minutes and then one at 5 minutes. And then we're going to be dry hopping this with Citra hops during a dry hop process. We're going to be doing that after fermentation finishes, adding our dry hops, and then letting that do its thing for 7 days. For water additions, they're going to be a little bit specific to your water profile. And I have a link in the video description below that goes over how to find a water profile and how to adjust your mash and water profile, adding different salts. Specifically for me, I'm going to be adding some calcium chloride, some gypsum, and some Epsom salt, along with a half a Camden tablet in each of my sparge and strike water. I also will add ascorbic acid at 4 grams in the mash. The ascorbic acid is going to help preserve that beer. This is still an IPA and can get some oxidation, and so that will help scrub any oxygen left over after we go through the mash and boil process. In addition, to get our mash pH correct, I'm going to be adding some lactic acid in the mash. I have that at 4 milliliters, but again, all of this stuff is going to be up to your water calculator. Again, watch that video in the description below. It'll go through the whole entire thing step by step. All right, guys, we're at the point where we finished our first runnings from our batch sparge. If you were doing a brew in a bag, you'd be in the last kind of 5 minutes of your mash process. This is when you would add your specialty grains. What I'm gonna do is add my hot water that's at 180 degrees or so. I'm gonna pour that in there, give it a good mix up. I'm gonna let that sit for about 5 minutes. And then for the last 5 minutes, I'm gonna add that in there. I'm going to mix it all around, get that good color mixed in there, the grains mixed in there. And then that's when we're gonna recirculate and we're going to get our final runnings. That way we recirculate through those dark grains to rinse off all of those colors without leaving them in too long where we get those astringent flavors. All right, just like that, it's been 5 minutes. We're gonna go ahead and give this a good stir around. We're gonna dump in our specialty grains, make sure we're rinsing that thing out, make sure we get all of that in there. That's what's gonna give this dark black IPA its color without adding that astringency. So we're not gonna leave it in that long, but I do wanna leave it in to warm it up in order to pull out some more of that color. And then we're gonna start that recirculation process like we did with our first runnings. And then we'll get to our full boil, which should be right around 7 to 7.2 gallons or so. All right, we've gotten up to a boil. I did put in my firm cap S to prevent boilovers. I'm gonna be adding our first ounce of hops, which is Magnum, for 60 minutes. All right, there's about 15 minutes left in the boil. We're gonna add a Werflock tablet into the beer, and then our 1 ounce of Cascade hops going in. All right, 5 minutes left in the boil. We're gonna be adding some yeast nutrient here. And then also adding an ounce of Cascade hop, which is our last hop addition for the boil. All right, guys, after we got done with primary fermentation, I was able to go ahead and dry hop 2 ounces of Centennial hops. I actually used whole cone hops for this one, and I used some sous vide magnets to pull them down inside of the beer to make sure that they got all of the oils and everything submerged inside of the beer. You can choose to do that by just having that hop bag right in there during primary fermentation, but because I was using those larger whole leaf cone hops, I decided to just open up the fermenter quickly, put them in there, and then screw it back on. So after an additional week of being on the dry hops, I went and transferred that into the keg. We've got it carved up. We're gonna go pour ourselves a glass. So let's do it. All right, guys, and there it is. It is a nice dark color, almost looks like a porter. It has a nice foam head on there. I mean, it just looks bigger in your hand than other beers. So let's go in for the aroma and we'll see how it turned out. Right off the bat, I do get some citrusy notes and other things. They're not overpowering or anything, and I don't know that they'd be overwhelmingly citrus by any means when I'm smelling it. But I don't smell any roasty flavors and things, and that's the things we were trying to avoid with this one in particular, or any astringent type of flavors. But we're not gonna know until we go in for a drink. All right, so right off the bat, I get those kind of bitterness like you would expect from an IPA. I get a little bit of those citrusy flavors from the hops. And then on the very, very back side of this beer, I do get a little bit of the darker malt flavors, but not very much. It's very subtle. It's almost like a very subtle coffee or toffee type of flavor at the end, which is allowed by BJCP guidelines. So it doesn't have to mask all of the dark characteristics, but they shouldn't be overpowering. They should be low to medium flavor combinations in there from those darker malts. And so one thing you could do to lower that is actually add all of those colored malts. Instead of adding them in your mash, you could do them towards the end of the boil in the last 5 minutes. We chose to put them in the mash, and I don't mind the roasty flavor. It's definitely not at the level of like a porter or a stout as far as the roastiness, but it's still clean, crisp, and bitter like an IPA would be. It just has those little subtle notes at the very back end. I think partially that's because I used a little bit of the chocolate malt in there, and if I probably just went with all Carafa III, I probably could have reduced the chocolatey kind of toffee notes a little bit more, but I actually kind of like that. I mean, this is a beer that I would brew over and over again and serve to friends. I mean, a good winter beer, it's got a little bit more body, I think, than a typical IPA has, which again is allowed by the BJCP guidelines, but it also retains that kind of that bitterness and that bite that you would expect in a normal IPA from the hops. And so I'm digging it. Kind of messes with your head a little bit to drink this because it's dark, right? So you expect those porter flavors, but you really don't get them until the very, very subtle back end, which I kind of enjoy. And so this is a really good beer to try out. This was my first black IPA. I've had several good ones and several so-so ones, but this time of year and winter months, right around Christmas time or into January even, this is a great winter beer that is going to be a little more full-bodied, something you'd want to sip around the fireplace, and definitely ones that I'm going to share with family and friends. As always, I'll have the full recipe in the video description below. Leave any comments below that in the comments section. Hit that like and subscribe. Happy brewing, and cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. A way you can support the channel is just by buying me a beer. There's a button right there on the screen, and there's a link in the video description below. You can also check out the merchandise in our store, and you can hit the video on the screen right now. You know you want to.